Detective Kotoi. Oh, I get it. Let's just hope this doesn't lead to a manga that doesn't know how to end. The episode opens with, oh my god, the normal intro is back. Oh my god, this is huge. I have to tell everyone. You know what? It's not that big a deal. Anyway, we actually open up with Kotori posting on her blog. She had been taking note of how often the Precure would appear whenever her sister was in the general vicinity. Looking over all of her data, she had come to a startling conclusion.
Ding ding ding! What do we have for?
Hold off on that one, Jim. Why does the Japanese language have to make my subtitling such an awkward process? Yeah, Konan Eogawa, this girl is not. The next morning, Kotori tried to pay special attention to her sister and oh geez, Hana, work on your table manners, girl. Kotori kept tabs on her sister all day, even consulting a close friend to both of them, Emiru. Oh yeah, I almost forgot these two were classmates. Well, anyway, as it turns out, Kotori believed that Hana's antics were somehow producing the Yoshimaida. Okay, I think I have a new favorite quote from the show. Regardless, she wanted to apologize to the Precure personally if her sister had caused them any inconvenience. Their conversation ended up attracting the attention of this guy named Fumito. Okay, to be fair, Fumito's admiration for Kiriel was justified, as he was, in fact, the very first guy Hana saved all the way back in episode 1. That's honestly a really good callback, and okay, what's with that face? And oh, that's even worse. You know what? No. Anyway, he ended up forcefully drafting the little girl into his fan club. Meanwhile, Kryasu, Jealous was having a mental breakdown because she felt she was all alone. Okay, where is this coming from? The last time we saw her, she had gleefully tossed her former subordinates to the side, who, by the way, do reappear in this episode, and have moved on with their lives, so good for them. But yeah, I doubt she actually missed them. Was Georgie Boy not giving her the time of day? That would fit with his character, but we haven't seen him being neglectful. My best guess is that she was suffering from chronophobia, the fear of the passage of time. This was reinforced by the less than subtle gesture of her destroying a nearby clock. And to be fair, this has always been hinted at with her character, with her constantly butting heads with her senior officers, and outright stating that she hates the concept of aging. And yet, this still does feel like a rather sudden twist. Though, thematically, I think I know where they're going with this. As I've mentioned in the past, most of the members of Kryasu represent different economical time periods of Japan, with Jealous representing the Lost Decade, which in a way is probably the worst time period to represent. As while the baby boomers and bubble era can be learned from and even looked back on with some nostalgic fondness, not many people actually remember the Lost Decade. Why else do you think it skipped almost entirely in the Yakuza games? Sure, it was a triumphant time period when the country managed to pull itself out of the rut it had dug for itself, but with the induction of Prime Minister Abe Shinzo's Abenomics policies, yes, that's what they're called, Japan has experienced far greater economic growth than anything the Lost Decades policies could produce, making the time period even more relevant than it was before. So maybe Jealous's current state of mind is a reflection on Japan's real-life attitude towards the time period she represents. Perhaps the beauty she says she's losing is the Lost Decades' relevance in the current economy. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is, Jealous's mortal enemy is in fact Shinzo Abe. Okay, calling it right now, Abe's gonna be the final boss of this anime. Again, this doesn't completely justify this twist in story, but it's an interesting little thought experiment. With that in mind, Jealous decided to up her game and what the? Just as a reminder, the Lost Decade was basically the 90s, which, yeah, was a time period I think most of my generation wish they could forget. Back with the Kiriel fan club, they stopped by a familiar-looking takoyaki stand. Yeah, as another nice callback, Hana was working at this stand again, hoping to learn more from the kind old vendor. I swear I'm gonna call copyright infringement on all of you! While enjoying her snacks, made of mostly empty carbs, Kotori reflected on how much she admired Kiriel while wishing Hana could be more like her. Yeah, about that. Hinase, remember this guy, talked about how Hana was great in her own right. This was honestly a sweet little scene overall, capped with Hana somewhat saving her sister from falling into a pond, and the fan club running off smiling as though this was the end of the episode already. But no, we still gotta deal with the Spice Girls reject. Unfortunately, no new summoning animation from Jealous, but we do get a symbolically strong Mo Shimaida. While it was primarily meant to represent the victim's desire to go home from work early, it did conveniently match up with Jealous and her aforementioned chronophobia. The Kiriel fan club ended up right in the middle of the Mo Shimaida's path of destruction. Fumito, having been inspired by the Precure's heroism, agreed to act as a decoy while Hinase got Kotori to safety. It was a really noble act that didn't work out at all. Well, A for effort there, dude. Luckily, Hana again arrived just in time to save her sister. In the process, she also said a phrase that Kotori remembered from her past. Yeah, these toy heroes really need to come up with more unique catchphrases. Anyway, they managed to ground the monster in a fairly impressive looking sequence, but punk rock Jealous wasn't ready to become irrelevant just yet, and gave her monster a huge burst of power that managed to KO all of the Precure. All seemed lost until one little fan club decided to throw their hats into the conversation. And they actually managed to produce enough Asu power to blow away Jealous's Toge power. Okay, that's kinda pushing it there, writers, but whatever, the Precure defeat the timely monster. Thus, the episode ended with Kotori seeming like she was about to ask Hana if she lived a double life, but gave up after seeing her fall asleep rather quickly, and instead slept alongside her sister in a very sweet little visual. This week's episode was written by Hikaru Ariga, somewhat of a dark horse of the Hakuto writing staff, in my opinion. She wrote the okay debut of Emiru and the excellent Hana's grandmother episode. She also has a very interesting Twitter. Didn't realize there was a marshmallow variant of the dog chocolate, but I digress. This was yet another good effort from her, in spite of some issues. One thing I'll give this episode, aside from its great callbacks, is how refreshing it is to see the civilians in this show actually be proactive, which has been a common theme in all of Ariga's episodes. I think the message she really wants to get across is that while the Precure are meant to be symbols of hope, nothing will change unless civilians start pulling their own weight. It was one of the final messages that Power Rangers was meant to go out on, and is just as relevant here as it was then. Speaking of which, I find it interesting that Ninja Steel just so happened to have a very similar episode in North America as this, with a civilian trying to help the heroes. Except like most things in Ninja Steel, it was very poorly done, and this was pretty good, even if the Asu power scene was a little overblown. Still, at least Fumito trying to protect his reluctant club members was pretty awesome. In fact, I'll go as far to say that every scene with the Kiriel fan club was just a joy. My other major gripe with this episode was Jealous suddenly going super 90s on us. But even that, I can at least enjoy from a metatextual standpoint, as I already went over, that seemed to be backed up with some very strong visual cues. Overall, another very solid episode from a developing young writer. If you haven't seen it yet, I recently uploaded the second part of my Smile Precure review. Check it out, and don't worry, I'll try to get the final part out in a timely fashion. Look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now, my friends. And you know, recently the Lost Decade has been extended to include the early 2000s. I wonder how that would affect Jealous's attire. Sorry you had to see that.